Hello, River Tree. This is Jesse here, and right now we are going to do a commentary for the new Lion King movie together. So how we're going to try to work it is to try to sync it up. Is I on my screen here, I will press play, and I will let you know when the Disney castle completely vanishes. And so that way you can kind of sync your movie up, and so we can be on the same page here. And I'll kind of narrate the first little bit of what's going on to try to get us synced up here. So I am pressing play on my version right now. It's loading. All right, so we're playing, panning down through some clouds here. We got the train and the Disney castle going. It's really weird watching this right now, knowing that Disneyland's closed. Like that's such a weird feeling to know. All right, so, but anyway, we're going. Fireworks are going. Tinkerbell's about to come up and go over the castle. Tinkerbell's going up. Then to the side and fade to black. Now, Disney presents. All right, so hopefully we're all synced up now. Um, yeah, so apparently this opening shot right here, this first shot, according to Favreau, the director, was the only real shot in the movie. The only kind of live action shot. Everything else is CG, which, you know, who knows how much of that is true or not, but if that's true, that's really fascinating that now we're gone, that we just saw the only real shot and everything else from here forward is completely CG. That's fascinating. So we're obviously doing this. I'm doing this because we are doing a series on theater and theology. The idea being, let's just watch some movies and look at some of the kind of biblical undertones, stories, themes that are woven into them. Uh, Jesus used parables a lot in teaching. I think that's a great way to get ideas across, to get complex ideas across, is to use stories. How many of the kind of lullabies, stories you heard when you were a kid, the idea was to get big ideas to teach you in some way. So that's kind of why I really enjoy looking at movies in that regard, because you can do a lot of kind of interesting things in movies to get ideas across. Now, as of doing this commentary right now, I have not yet written my sermon for Lion King. So I'm just going to kind of be almost thinking out loud for this. And so who knows, maybe I will go off on a tangent that will have absolutely nothing to do with the sermon, or who knows, maybe this will just be a longer form of that sermon. But I don't know yet. I haven't written it. I'm just sitting down to watch it right now. I got a couple page of notes here. And so we're going to kind of go for it here. Obviously, this is one of the classic songs, Circle of Life. It doesn't get much more Disney than kind of this opening here. And obviously with this, there's notions of, a circle of life as hinting at the idea of a new life in Christ, right? There's definitely some undertones of that kind of going on here. What am I going? Oh, the baboon. All right. These animals look really good. I'm just impressed that these animals look as good as they do. I remember there was some controversy. I don't know if that's the right word, but there was some debate about how to classify this movie, because I believe, if I'm remembering right, it was classified as a live action movie, which it's not, because there's nothing live action about this. This is all computer animated. So should it be classified as in the same category as a cartoon? And I don't know. It's fascinating. This might be one of the most spoofed things in Disney history. Like, how many times have you seen this when you have, a birth announcement, or, you're playing with your cat or your dog, just to, stand up and do the Simba at Pride Rock, just hold out before everyone, right? In some ways, you could think of this, potentially as a kind of baptism event for Simba. It's getting at that same idea of presenting before everyone as, this is your new life. This is a new step you are taking. So this in a way could be seen as, I mean, you even have, the light coming down here, just in that shot, almost like the dove descending on Jesus. So there's some interesting parallels even right here. You know, what are we, 2 minutes into the movie? You're already getting some interesting ideas. And pulling back, fading out. I like it. Lion King. Excellent. So I don't want to say original Lion King because there's been a lot. I guess, if you want to go way back, the original Lion King is Hamlet, but then moving forward to Kimba the White Lion. But ultimately, the kind of 1994 cartoon was one of my favorite Disney cartoons growing up, and so I'm excited to kind of get into this one and see what we got going on here. So a little. The mouse looks really good, doesn't it? Just jumping around. That's amazing. So one of the things we could talk about, and I'm assuming if you're listening to this, and really it's Lion King, so I'm assuming most of everyone has seen Lion King. Even if you haven't seen this one, if you've just seen the cartoon, the plot's the exact same. So I'm going to be talking, assuming you know the characters and know the plot of Lion King. So one thing that could be interesting to look at is who do potentially some of these characters represent. We're about to meet our kind of villain character here, Scar. And this one might be the easiest to kind of get at who does this character represent. It's pretty obvious this character represents evil. This is your, main antagonist, your prototypical just evil character. This is your devil, your Satan, your Satan, just your evil incarnate character here. But I think some of the other characters have a little more nuance to them. If you look at, say, Mufasa, uh, the dad, who does this character represent? I would argue that I think this represents God the Father, because he's playing the father here, kind of in this role. But there is some kind of issues with that because ultimately this character does die and God the Father doesn't die. But that brings up an interesting, or a thing to remember when looking at either, parables or stories or, theology compared to story. And that is you can always take it too far. Like, I know one of my favorite just funny things is someone will be, analyzing a parable of Jesus and they'll just keep stretching and stretching. Like, well, so does this represent, does the farmer represent this and this and this? And like, you have to find the point where you step back and go like, no, that's just the story. That's just the vehicle for getting at some ideas. So, but I think to me, it's pretty safe for me to say that from when I watch this, I view Mufasa as the kind of God the Father character. Now, the relationship between these two here, between Scar and Mufasa, this kind of brother against brother relationship, that is a really common theme you see in the Old Testament. And I honestly don't know and I'm sure it is said at some point that I just haven't paid attention maybe, who is the elder brother? I would assume Mufasa is because he's king and not Scar, but I honestly don't know that. But in the Old Testament, what is interesting is you have these brother versus brother headbutting battles a lot. And a decent chunk of the time, it is the younger brother who ends up kind of coming out ahead or getting, or kind of quote unquote winning, as if you were. If you kind of go through and think about, you have Cain and Abel. I mean, Cain, might not be a great way to say won, but, came out of that, was the last person standing coming out of that battle. Cain was the younger brother. You have Jacob and Esau. Jacob is ultimately the one that is kind of elevated and moved forward despite all the shady things he does, but he's the younger brother. He's the heel grabber, pulling Esau back in. Joseph, one of the youngest of his siblings, is the one that ends up ascending and becoming, the in power in Egypt, and what ultimately leads his family to safety during the famines that go by and such. So I think it's just this notion of brother versus brother is a very, very common theme you see in the Old Testament, and one that ultimately plays out in this movie in drastic ways. I have my, I mean, this is I have with me a iced coffee. How big are you? This might be, yeah, this is 36 ounces of iced coffee. So that is all but assuring that the last 20 minutes of this movie is going to be bladder pinching for me. But you wouldn't have it any other way, right? I mean, when I watch a movie or something, I need a big thing to drink and I need some snacks. Obviously, I can't have snacks now because that would just sound weird and no one wants that. But having a big thing of popcorn, or honestly, Sour Patch Kids. Those are some of my go-to favorite movie snacks, especially in a movie theater because they're quiet. They don't make a lot of noise, and they're tasty. They're just delicious. Now, if we're going to kind of continue this idea, thinking about who do some of these characters represent, Simba, I think, might be the most interesting one. Because I feel like there's really a couple different ways you could go with Simba. Speaking of which, there's Simba right there. You could go the Jesus route. He is the son. If Mufasa's God, Simba's Jesus. That character that goes through trials. You could see when he's exiled out after Mufasa dies, that's his time in the wilderness maybe. He returns, comes back in, kind of saves everyone. You could take that route. I think there's, some good arguments for that. But there's another one that I think I really like for Simba, and that's Moses. So think about Moses' story. Moses, after his initial birth and the hiding, and his mother hiding him, being picked up by Pharaoh's daughter, after all that, Moses ascends to become a prince of Egypt. He is in a place of power. He has kind of all of this authority. He ends up killing someone and for fear of his life, flees, is exiled, goes out into the wilderness, out into the desert, out in the Sinai desert, where ultimately he makes a pretty good life for himself. He ends up getting married. He ends up being like his father-in-law Jethro's head shepherd. Like he's living a pretty good life. He's happy, settled in. Ultimately, Moses gets called back, right? God, the burning bush, God calls Moses back to Egypt, back to where he was born, to ultimately go in and save his people. I think there's a lot of parallels to Simba's story here with Moses. Simba right now is the prince. He's the lion prince, if you were right now. Ultimately, there is a death that happens. Mufasa dies. Simba, through Scar's kind of trickery, thinks he's at fault for it, and so flees, fearing for his life, fearing retribution for killing someone, because he thinks he's responsible for Mufasa's death. He ends up fleeing out into the wilderness, going, out past the deserts, ends up carving out a pretty good life for himself. He runs into Timon and Pumbaa. Life's pretty good for them out there, right? They're Hakuna Matata it up. They're enjoying. He's perfectly content to stay out there until he's called back. In Simba's case, rather than a burning bush, it's Nala who goes out and retrieves him. Basically gives him that same speech of like, your people need you. Don't abandon them. Don't, you can't stay out here. Simba ends up coming back, freeing his people, fulfilling that Moses-style role. And I think that could be something interesting for us to explore maybe in a sermon at some point, is the notion of, the journey of Moses. I think is a fascinating one. I think there's a lot of good stuff that could be said in that. All right, what do we got going on here? We got a line. Oh, did we just get? Yeah, Zazu. I'm a big Zazu fan. Like in the first one, it was Rowan Atkinson, if I'm remembering right, and this one, John Oliver. I feel like John Oliver epitomizes what Zazu is for me. Um, just this overly pompous dude who loves, like order, loves things strictly ordered, and I do not feel any. I don't feel bad about saying this because John Oliver says this about himself a lot. John Oliver kind of looks like a bird. Like, if you've never seen this dude, Google him. He's got kind of a big nose. He looks a little bit like Zazu in real life. So I think that was just, great casting there. Oh, are we going to get our first Nala appearance? No, no, not quite. Oh, there's a bug. What is that? Now we have somebody here kind of testing out his limits of what he can do. What do we have? God, that bug looks crazy, doesn't it? So I do not have the sound on mine. I have the closed captionings going, and half of it just says like animal grunts, grunts noisily, like it's like that one there. All it said was just growls, whimpers. That's all it says. Oh, Scar just creeping up here. I've always wanted more kind of backstory on Scar, right? Like obviously, where did the Scar come from? Is it implied it was in a battle, previously to this? Is it wasn't a fight with Mufasa maybe, and that's why he hates him so much? Who knows? Yeah, that is one character I would definitely want more info on. Oh, okay, right here. This scene right here is kind of a good reflective scene of Jesus's time in the wilderness. That was the last series that we were touching on. But here, Scar is kind of prodding at Simba a little bit, getting at the idea like, oh, did your father show you the entirety of the land? Well, yeah, of course he did. Oh, really? Even that over there? Wait, what's over there? Oh, that's no. And I love this reverse psychology here. That's no place for a cub. If you tell, like, I mean, me, if someone tells me this is the one thing you can't do, that's the one thing I'm gonna want to do. I mean, like right now, we are in the middle of this quarantine. I have never seen so many people in my life crowd into the parks. I mean, granted, I've only been here, what, 6, 7 months or so, but there's a park fairly close to where we live here, and I go running there a decent amount. Normally, when I go running there, there's one or two other people there. Now, when I go in there, it is just jam packed to capacity. It's like, everyone gets told, stay inside, limit the amount of time you go outside as much as possible. And so it's the first thing we do. Like, we run outside. I have a friend who lives in Oregon, and when all of this started, um, the kind of coastal cities just said, everyone stay inside, try to reduce contact as much as possible, and everyone just instantly went to the beaches, which I thought was funny. Like this time of year, no one's going to be going to the beaches a whole lot, but tell people they can't, and that's instantly where they flood. So that is a great tactic that Scar uses here. And honestly, I mean, that was a great tactic. No, great is probably a bad word, but an effective tactic that evil uses a lot, that Satan uses. Just the human nature of, well, you can't tell me what to do. If you tell me something not to do, I instantly want to do it. I think that is such an impactful way that evil kind of needles at us and gets at us. And so that's what Scar did in this previous scene. And so this is the kind of impact of that is now all Simba wants to do is ditch Zazu here, ditch John Oliver, and go to that elephant graveyard. Follow me to freedom. What? Come on, Simba. What are you? What's going on here? So one thing that has kind of bothered me about this remake is look at the character eyes. I don't know, they are just like deadpan eyes. It's kind of creepy because you have these actors giving really great emotional performances, and I feel like the eyes of the CG animals just aren't matching it. Like they went for this ultra realistic, animal faces. Obviously, animals' eyes aren't as emotive as cartoon eyes, but to me, it just creates this weird disconnect here, which I don't know. I think that is just a hilarious. It's distracting for me. Oh, the I've never seen. Okay, actually, this might have been one of my favorite songs from the previous cartoon version, and it's actually spawned. There's a video game tie-in to that original cartoon version. The level that goes along with this song is maddening. It might be the hardest thing I've ever done in a video game. You have to kind of bounce atop the heads of some giraffes, but they're all timed, so they flip up and knock you back. So it's one of those old school video games where it was just 100% about memorizing the pattern and the order. It was just trial and error 100 times before you got it right. But that level is just like seared into my head, and I can't hear. Well, I know they're not singing here, but I can't really hear this song, these words, without having flashbacks to that level in that video game. Well, this is different here. So are they trying to use cover under all the elephants to get away? So I've actually only seen this remake once. So I'm kind of learning it along with everyone else too. But I remember it being almost identical to the previous one, which I watched a ton because I loved it. Zazu there mentioned it's a sworn duty to, keep Simba safe. You're not very good at your job, Zazu. They managed to get away from you pretty fast here. So one thing that is I've always thought was funny about, kind of these movies is the just kind of ignoring of animal behavior is funny. I think the opening scene of this movie, it might be the funniest for that. Why would you have, the gazelles, the warthog, I guess, were the warthogs there? I don't know, the elephants, the giraffes, all that coming to witness the birth of, their predator's son. That's kind of a weird situation, isn't it? But who knows? I just always thought that was a funny. I don't know. That'd be like, I don't know what that would be like. I guess I can't think of it, but it's good nonetheless. I'm gonna get some good foreshadowing there. That Nala being able to pin Simba very quickly. That'll come back later. Little callback. Oh, here we are. Do we? Looks like we are at the elephant graveyard. That is a creepy place. So what I don't know is why are all the elephants here together? This is the elephant graveyard. Do the elephants all die here? Do they walk in? Is it a thing like, when you're an elephant, when you're sick, you're about to die, you have to come to the elephant graveyard? Or do they die somewhere else and they're somehow moved here? The other elephants bringing them in? I don't know. It's logistics like that I want to know about. Why is this a thing? I mean, you have your obvious kind of hell, Sheol imagery going on here, the kind of dead, barren landscape, the kind of spluttering up of the mud bubbling over, the rocks, the kind of these white rocks stained red by either mineral deposits, blood, whatever it's supposed to be. It's this really kind of eerie, desolate vibe that you could very easily associate with kind of that hell atmosphere, or just wilderness in general, just the desolateness that is out in the wilderness, and that's where they are. They've left the lushness, and they've chosen to walk into danger. Remember, they've chosen to walk into danger because of Scar's kind of manipulation of them. Oh, you got some hyenas popping up into the background here. So these hyenas, these kind of main three hyenas, they actually had their names changed for this version of the film. The main three hyenas now take their names from the Swahili words for savage, gambling, and precious. If I remember right, in the original, I guess I have my computer right here. I can look at it. The original hyenas, I think, wasn't one of them named like Ed or something like that? I feel like they were. Yeah, we had Ed. And it was, yeah, it was voiced by Jim Cummings. Ed was voiced by Winnie the Pooh himself. Look at that. Yeah, and Whoopi Goldberg was one of the hyenas. But yeah, I like these hyenas. They actually create that kind of ominous, menacing vibe, whereas the other ones just felt kind of silly and almost, cheesy. Now we're getting to this area where Mufasa doesn't rule over me. So we're getting that kind of pushback, that notion that the kind of gift of God is something that, you know, this person, in this situation is rejecting and actively fighting against it. That creates an interesting movement forward because you have, Scar, as we ultimately know, is the one kind of leading this group, is the one dangling false promises even before the hyenas. And so, you have this group of people that are just kind of following a dynamic leader. They're following ultimately vacant promises. That just gets into all sorts of discussions and issues of leadership, of, why are certain personalities drawn either to religion, drawn to Christianity? Why do some ultimately kind of reject that notion? What is it that's replacing that notion for some people? So I think the hyenas here are just an amazing viewpoint or window into kind of the psychology of why certain people follow one person as opposed to another, or one ideal, or why people cling to certain religions, certain thought patterns as opposed to another. Because we're all seeking and searching for something. We're all ultimately seeking the same thing, and that is kind of this: what is life about? We're seeking for approval. We're ultimately seeking some point or driven purpose for our lives. And so, where do you find that purpose? And in this case, these hyenas, they have found it in the false promises of Scar, or of, the devil, Satan, the Satan. That's where they're finding their purpose at right now. So, but as we see, things will kind of shift as the movie goes on. I think it's a really interesting window into that mental psychology. All right, so Mufasa has come in, saved the day, pull the two little cubs out of danger here. I think this scene is really interesting because look at that, like even in CG, look at that face, look at Simba's face. You can tell he's afraid. He knows he has messed up. But pay attention to how Mufasa deals with it, how Mufasa addresses the situation. Because I think there's some really interesting parallels between how God often deals with us. You know, that that's a good shot there of the sun kind of coming up behind him. But like here, you can see he's just terrified, and even like that shot of the paw, the stepping into it, he's just reminded how little we are, how little he is, and that's something we see parallels a lot of. We're constantly reminded. We may think we have things figured out. We may think we have this great ideals, but ultimately we're so little and insignificant compared to God. But we're not insignificant. We're significant to God. And I think that's where this interesting dynamic comes in. This idea, I just wanted to show you that I could be brave like you. That is an interesting idea because I wanted to emulate you, but in a way that wasn't honoring. And I think we can do that sometimes in our walks with God. We can do things to try to elevate ourselves to God levels. And I think sometimes we might not even realize we're doing that. But I think that's why that line is so important. I just wanted to be like you, but I didn't know how. And so I went about it the wrong way, and ultimately it was a bad thing to do. Now, here's the kind of interesting part about this scene. Things twisted really fast. Simba was scared, and Mufasa knew this wasn't a time for harsh punishment. Knew this was a time for love and forgiveness, which that is reflective of our relationship with God. God is a forgiving God. Our God ultimately loves us and sets, these quote unquote rules in place for our protection to give us better lives. So I think that's just a greatly epitomized right there. Now this scene, the kind of look at the stars scene, I think you could really see the notion of cast your problems upon God. Ultimately in that scene, they were talking, about kind of like gods in a kind of pluralistic sense. But take it into our sense. The notion of look at the stars, cast your worries on there. When you have questions, go look up. That's what we should do with God. When ultimately we have these worries, these questions, when we're afraid, when we're seeking guidance, look to God. Look to the stars, look to God. I think that is a great kind of nugget that scene has. When we don't know what to do, look toward heaven, look toward God, ask. I think so often we forget to ask God for advice, for help getting through things. In our prayers, we often, I'm going to pray for this and for this. But I think a lot of times we can forget to just simply sit in silence and listen. We ask a lot, but we don't give space for answers. We don't give space to hear God. And so that's why I love that, look to the stars, the kind of atmosphere, ambiance of that scene. It's peaceful. It's night. It's a clear sky. It's calm. You can sit, think, pray, but just be still and hear from God. So I think that's a really cool scene right there. Okay, so here we have Scar ultimately coming back to the hyenas. Um, he's upset because he thinks he served up the prince on a silver platter and they messed it up. But watch how quickly and how masterfully Scar gets the hyenas instantly back on his side with these promises. You know, we're going to offer you a quick way out. When I am in charge, things will be different. Yeah, I think that's a great kind of tactic to always, that a lot of people use to get their points across or to get people onto their sides. Whatever the situation is now, of course it would be better if I was in charge. And Evil is great at doing that too. So this is actually one of my saddest kind of changes from the original cartoon. I really liked Scar's song here. Like it, I thought it epitomized that character really well. And so we have this kind of spoken word thing going on, which gets the same point across, but I don't know. I liked the kind of atmosphere that song created because it just showed you just how evil Scar was. And again, this is hitting upon that idea of brother versus brother. You have someone who wants what his brother has and is willing to do anything to get it. You have kind of shades of Jacob and Esau. Esau was in charge. Esau was the eldest. Esau had the birthright. Jacob wanted it and was prepared to do just about anything to get it. They were kind of getting these seeds, these reflective notions thrown throughout here, this song. You can see that kind of foreshadowing of him on Pride Rock. That's a kind of false illusion of Pride Rock, that shot of him kind of howling at the moon there. Oh, this scene in the cartoon still might be one of the most heartbreaking scenes of all time. Like it might be up there with, Bambi's mom dying. Just oh, when Mufasa dies here, it's so gut wrenching, isn't it? And speaking of Mufasa, I absolutely love that for this one they brought James Earl Jones back to play Mufasa. So, because could you really think of anyone else playing Mufasa, right? No, it's James Earl Jones. Like, and maybe it's just me. In my head, God sounds like James Earl Jones, right? Isn't it just like the perfect, like, booming, authoritative voice? We'll ignore the fact that he's Darth Vader, but we'll ignore that for right now. It's just that voice is, I love that, just authoritative, just kind of booming James Earl Jones voice. I think this is another great depiction of the way evil can work a lot of times. Scar's deceit of Simba. Ultimately, when Mufasa dies, it's not Simba's fault, right? We as the audience can see that. But Scar twisting it so that Simba thinks he is at fault is such a useful tactic for evil. How often does evil trick us into thinking we're at fault for something? Or, like this is such an effective tactic that evil uses to twist things, to make us feel like whatever we do is somehow against God, or that it is entirely our fault, trying to isolate us. Because ultimately, that's what Scar's doing here. Scar is trying to isolate Simba, because things that are isolated are vulnerable. Things that are away from the protection of family, friends, things that have kind of moved out of that sphere of protection are ultimately the most vulnerable. So that evil does that a lot. They try to put you against family, your church family. Oh, that is one of their favorite kind of tactics, is trying to isolate, separate someone from their church family, from their real family, from their blood family, from their friend group. Because if you can get pulled away and isolated, as we'll see Simba here, that's when you're most vulnerable. That's when evil will come in and strike. So this scene, I think, is a brilliant depiction of that. The ultimate setup of catastrophe, and then blaming it on someone other than themselves. That's what evil is so good at. Pinning blame on someone else, and then having that someone else then feel isolated. So it's almost a double layer going on. I'm not sure about those wildebeest kind of stampeding down at the bottom. I think the CG might not be the best there, but they are kind of in the background, and so that's all right. That we'll let that one go. That one's explainable. Okay, I mean, I just kind of noticed this. This might be stretching it too far because I'm really liking this Moses motif, but Simba is protected here in the cleft of this rock, kind of very similar to the way Moses was. When Moses says, I want to see you, God." God puts Moses in the cleft of a rock, so he's protected from kind of the glory of God, and ultimately, sees God's back. And I thought that was an interesting kind of idea here, that's again the cleft of the rock is where Simba was stashed to be saved. That might be overthinking things too much. It might just have been a convenient, editorial spot for that. But I don't know. I thought that's an interesting parallel there. I like that. Oh, what a harsh last line there. Oof. And there you kind of have the notion, Scar striking Mufasa's eye, maybe hinting at the idea that it was Mufasa that hurt Scar's eye. I don't know. We don't know, but that's a very possible, because there was a very obvious striking the same cut eye that Scar has. Where was this dude at? What was taking him so long to get through here? So I am furiously checking the recording at probably every like 5 minutes. I'm like, oh no, did it stop recording? Just stop it. But we're still good. We're still good. If you're hearing this, ultimately, it recorded. But for me, I'm checking probably way more often than I need to. Oh, heartbreaking. Oh, this is rough. Oh, just curling up next to him. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that just, what have you done? Just that twisting things just enough to ultimately be portrayed to Scar's advantage. You see that a lot, going back to Jesus in the wilderness. The Satan would use scripture, used Old Testament passages, and would tweak them, twist them just enough that they weren't now the passages from the Old Testament. They were interpreted in a way that was meant to benefit Satan. And here, Simba isn't strong enough, doesn't know, isn't rooted enough to realize what's going on. And so ultimately, Scar is able to isolate him, is able to get him on his own, away from anyone he is known and loved. It's interesting that up until the very end of the movie, Scar doesn't do his own dirty work. He has his hyenas. He's kind of the master manipulator in the background up until kind of the very end when he has to kind of get his own hands dirty. I think that's an interesting kind of feature or dynamic of the character of Scar. He's very much in that prototype of the background character, the background evil character, the puppet master. So I do like how in the world of Lion King, there's a very clear border of the of the kingdom. I guess it's this cliff. It's just like, nah, this is where the kind of Lion King kingdom ends, right here. I think that's hilarious. I don't know why. There's just sharp borders. So here's the beginning of not Mufasa, of Simba's kind of wilderness exile. This guy's kind of very almost ham-fisted visually, leaving the kind of green behind him, walking out into the desolateness, walking out alone, leaving everything he's ever known. This is, you know, in every way possible, stepping out into that wilderness, stepping out into this exile. Everything he's ever known is behind him. In front of him, everything is dead and bleak. And so we have Scar here thinking he has won. And I mean, at this point, he kind of has won. He doesn't know Simba's still alive. He doesn't know any of that. Like a little nod of hope that that Nala has there. Like I can't do it alone. Oh, maybe nope. It's not going to be a good alone. It's hyenas. I think that's an interesting kind of false hope the narrative gives you right there. I think this is an interesting kind of rhetoric tactic too that Scar takes there, because everything he is saying sounds like potentially good things, right? We're gonna work together with this other group. We're gonna try to build new things. We're gonna try to build a better kingdom. All of that sounds good, and then you see the how it's going to be played out. I think that's an interesting tactic of framing things that ultimately Scar knows are is evil, but framing them in ways that sound like they're good. It gets that whole tactic of evil twisting truth, twisting ideas, twisting goodness just enough to make us think, have to stop and pause. Wait, is that sounds good? Oh no, ultimately it's not, and it's kind of reinforcing that kind of Scar's role as the Satan, as the Satan, as the devil in this, the deceiver, the great deceiver. It's a cool spiraling shot coming into it. So you have what you think might be a mirage coming in at you, and then ultimately, nope, that is not a mirage. How many movies could you have your kind of main hero in trouble, and ultimately who comes in to save the day? Seth Rogen. How many movies like would that ever happen in? But this movie is so well cast. Like everyone in this movie hits on all cylinders. I mean, having Seth Rogen as Pumbaa, I feel like Seth Rogen basically is the human Pumbaa. Like that is, great, great casting there. And I mean, our best, like my favorite casting is still coming up here, where we have Beyonce as adult Nala. That's great. I mean, Donald Glover as adult Simba. That is awesome. I like Pumbaa's just optimistic view there. There's got to be something we can do, right? That is a very intriguing notion. You can't really do anything about your past, what you've done. But what you can work on, what you can change is your future. You can, that's the way God looks at us. That's a terrifyingly close shot of Timon there. But that's the way God looks at us. Once we accept Jesus, once we reach out and grab that salvicious gift, what we've done in the past doesn't matter. It's now what we do in our future. Our kind of the slate is wiped clean. There. This is you know, peek behind the curtain. I am recording this during Holy Week, so that's what this whole kind of week leading up to Easter is about. It's that the blood of Christ wipes the slate clean, kind of covers your sin, and allows you to move forward a new being. So that's a really interesting kind of line there from Pumbaa, that it doesn't matter what you've done. What matters is where you're going, what you're doing in the future. Ah, Hakuna Matata. Maybe the most well, I don't know. What would you say is kind of more well known or kind of lived on more from this movie? The opening circle of life, Rafiki holding Simba up, or Hakuna Matata? I don't know. Those are both kind of very enduring images from the '94 movie. But I think there is a kind of notion of Hakuna Matata. Like you can find some kind of biblical precedence for that notion. Obviously, you can't take it too far. But Matthew 6, when you talk about God is concerned for the birds of the field, the birds of the air, and such, is God not more concerned for you? If God has clothed the lilies so elegantly, does God not care more for you? There's that notion that today's problems are enough for today. Let tomorrow's problems kind of be enough for tomorrow. That's kind of that Hakuna Matata mindset of worrying about things in the future don't really do us any good. Now, that's not saying, don't think about the future, don't plan, don't whatever, but don't obsessively worry. I think that is a very kind of biblical ideal of we just have to learn to rely on God. We just have to trust that God will take care of us. Kind of that's our Hakuna Matata. You know, no worries because we can cast all of our worries on God, on Jesus, because of the blood of Christ. We can cast all of those worries on. I like that's a kind of a fun reframing of the Hakuna Matata mindset that Timon and Pumbaa are kind of swinging completely kind of overboard on here. But I think interesting. So I actually used to work at a company with a guy who got hardcore into crickets and specifically cricket flour. So he would take crickets through whatever process he did. I was not 100% sure on it. Would make cricket flour and would use that as you would, flour in any baking recipe. So I think the thing that he kind of specialized in was brownies. So he made brownies with cricket flour. And surprisingly enough, you couldn't really tell they weren't normal brownies. They were, they tasted like normal brownies, just there was probably, 200 crickets or so. I don't know how many, but yeah, there's a ton of crickets in the brownies. So, who knows there? I can't really fault Simba too much. I like how during that kind of aging thing, Simba obviously ages the most, but Pumbaa, if you look closely, gets little gray hairs. I think that's a good kind of sign of time going past too. Even the warthog's old and gray now. So if we're going to continue with the Moses kind of parallels here, this is Moses has been exiled. He's created his new life. He's happy now, and that's where we are here with Simba. Simba lost everything, ran, was forced out, found his new family. He found happiness again. He he has a good life here, that they have that little oasis area they're in, but things are going to change here. The burning bush moment is coming. It's coming in the form of Nala coming out to call him back in. And if you would like a iced coffee update, I am um, down to probably 12 ounces. So what is that? If I drank like 20 ounces of iced coffee, I'm not going to be sleeping tonight probably then. So we have everything falling apart for the Lions now. He's just reported the last of the herds are gone. The last vestiges that made the Pride Lands good have vanished. So Scar, in however many years this has been, has managed to turn the Pride Lands into what the Elephant Graveyard was. That desolate land, nothing's growing, kind of even the color palette's gone drab. All the colors gone out. You're left with really nothing. And this is another kind of interesting reflection of what evil can do. If evil is allowed if evil is allowed a kind of stronghold in you personally or, wherever, it'll start turning what was once good bad. It'll start corrupting it. It'll start taking, the Pride Lands. It was lush, gorgeous, full of life. It's all but dead now. It's reflective of the graveyard, which was Sheol, which was hell, the underworld, the place where evil dwells. It's that is extended out now because evil has been loosed. Evil has been let out in its power here. And so the kind of dominion, the reflection of evil is reflected in the landscape. So this we're kind of just driving the nail in a little further now. This is painting our lowest point. You'll eat after the hyenas and they won't leave anything left. Or, from a narrative standpoint, you're dipping into that valley, right before your third act, the beginning of your third act. That's when you should be at your lowest point. And that's where we're hitting now. They're in danger of even being able to survive forward. And so Nala here can't accept that, and so has to go try to change their fate. Little does she know she's going to find Simba. She doesn't know Simba's out there. She's just going out to find food. She's going out to just do what she can. And I think that's something that can be reflective too in our lives. We ultimately do not know how the actions we take can be so significant. I mean, here, she thinks she is just going out to maybe find some food. And I think we do that a lot. We think, oh, that was just one conversation with someone, or that was, one time I had someone over for dinner, or whatever it is, these small things that we do, we ultimately don't know these spidering impacts they can have. She thinks she's going out to find a meal. She ultimately goes out and finds Simba. She turns the tide of everything. And we do that. We can do that. We ultimately do not know the large scale plan God has. We have no way of knowing. But all we can do is take that next faithful step. All we can do is just listen to the voice of God, go where we're told, go where we're directed, go where we feel God is calling us to. Because a little thing we do, we might not see the kind of ramifications, see the benefits of that thing that we do. But it could be just one step for someone along a path, whether that path ultimately is a path to salvation or a path to get out of a difficult situation or whatever it is. We just ultimately never know. So we just constantly have to take that next faithful step. And so there she goes. She is off taking her next faithful step, not really knowing ultimately where it'll go, but having enough faith to take it nonetheless. Ouch. Like a real lion. That's harsh. See, so this discussion here, the difference between the circle of life and the kind of straight line of indifference, I think that's you can really get at the idea of if you don't have some kind of hope, if you don't have a hope in Christ, if you don't have kind of that notion of we're going toward Christ, then life really could potentially feel like a kind of straight line of indifference. It can feel like we're just moving toward nothingness. So I think that's the kind of great thing about Christ. The great thing about a belief, a relationship with Christ, is it kind of takes that line away and does turn it into a circle. Because ultimately, we're reborn in Christ and we're moving toward that notion of eternal bliss with Christ. I think that's something just so amazing. One of the amazing gifts we have in Christ is it gives our lives meaning. Because I think that's one thing we're all worried about. Excuse me. Is that notion that our lives don't have meaning. I think that's a fear a lot of people have, that, oh no, am I just on this line of indifference ultimately leading to nothing? And so I like that distinction. I like that discussion there of, is life a kind of circle of life, ultimately being filling, ultimately being reborn in Christ, ultimately being reborn in, the New Jerusalem with Christ? Or is it a straight line of indifference? Obviously, we as Christians, see that circular sense, see that ultimately fulfillment in Christ. So here you can see Simba still kind of wants to believe what his father told him. He's still, he's kind of shunned it, moved away from it, almost forgotten it, but he still has that notion that, look to the stars, look to heaven. But they're saying he's still drawn to that notion. I think it's oftentimes we can be that way. You know, we can walk away from Christ. We can turn our backs and move away, but there seems to always be something drawing us back in. Christ is always trying, always leaving arms wide open for us to make our way back. And I think that is another amazing facet about Christ. The willingness, the openness to continually draw us to him. All right, I know this scene with the hair going all the way back is meant to kind of like, illustrate that circle of life discussion they just had. I don't know. To me, this is just ridiculous, right? Like, I know it's the point. It's supposed to be ridiculous. It's kind of that divine providence idea. I feel like the scene's overly long at times. I feel like it goes forever. This feels like the Rube Goldberg machine of Disney. Just all of these things are continually happening by chance, and moving forward, just to get this tuft of hair into the hands of Rafiki. Like the bird just brings it, this hair specifically over to him, and that bird's like, nah, just immediately throws it out. Well, that is a close up, more close up on a piece of poop than I've ever wanted to see in my life. That's unsettling. Oh, all right, there it goes again. So we're back on the road again, ultimately going back out over the wilderness, headed back to the Pride Lands. What is this? What is this ant doing? Like he obviously knows that's not a leaf. Like what are you doing, ant? You imagine everyone else comes up with leaves and he comes up with a tuft of hair. What are you thinking? He's thinking the same thing too. Like what is this ant doing with a piece of hair? I want to know what kind of magic Jedi power, whatever going on, Rafiki has here. How does he know? He just like feels the hair, looks at it, like, oh, that's Simba hair. How do you know that? What are you hiding, Rafiki? That's another character. I want to know what like Rafiki's story. How'd you how'd you get this job, Rafiki? It's just like, shaman here in, in the Lion King kingdom. As we're about to see, the lion is most definitely not sleeping tonight. Nala is coming in fast for him. I, I was doing some reading before this commentary, and uh, Seth Rogen, who plays Pumbaa, was apparently such a bad singer that his voice coach was actually hitting his head against the wall, trying to get him to just hit one or two right notes. I think that's funny. Like Seth Rogen, great writer, very funny person. Apparently not a champion at singing. Not good at that. But that's fine. Everyone has to kind of know what they're good at, I guess. Everyone's good at something. You just have to figure out what that is. And bam, here we go. Here is Nala. Okay, my subtitles, all they're saying is grunting, yelling, grunting, growling. That's all they're saying through all of this. Like that kind of cuts the tension out of it a little bit. It's a good meerkat scream. There we go. Good work, Simba. Simba comes in to try to save the day. That's a good lion fight. But now remember, from that foreshadowing coming back in from earlier when we saw that Nala pinned Simba easily. It's hanging the lantern, then going out and getting it. Old best friend meeting new best friend. That could be awkward. So here you have this notion that Nala is kind of fulfilling that burning bush role here in Pumbaa or in Simba's Moses narrative. You have to go save your people. You have to take up your place. Moses' idea, you have to take up your place as a leader. And here at Simba, you have to take your place as king. And so, Simba doesn't want to leave. This place is incredible. You love it. He wants to continue to carve out this life for him here because it ultimately would be easier for him to stay here. It would be, they would have a great life staying here. But ultimately, they know they can't do that because their family is suffering back home because of everything that evil is doing back home. It's like Moses ultimately couldn't stay with Jethro, couldn't stay with the family he had carved out, couldn't stay out in the Sinai wilderness because his people were being suffered. His people were suffering at the hands of evil. Now, this is what you paid your money for, right? To hear uh, Beyonce and Donald Glover singing the song, singing "Where Is the Love Tonight." So again, he's getting to the notion he's afraid of his past. He's afraid because of the lie that evil told him in his past, and he's not willing to let that go. He's putting that up as a barrier. So evil's continually, even now, that evil is still trying to isolate him. So I mean, even here, he's almost kind of showing like we kind of have our own Pride Rock here. You know, this is kind of reflective of the new life I've carved out here. This is what I had back there. We can have here. Kind of building to that point that ultimately he has to turn back, despite everything he's carved out here. The pull to go back, the the kind of pull of, for Moses, the pull from God to return and save his people was too much. So all this is just setting up that notion, that idyllic situation that Simba's in, and how he ultimately gives it up to save his family, to save his people, his lions, people, however you want to think about it, to go back to save his pride, his people from evil. So evil has kind of pushed Simba down so much that he doesn't think he's worthy to be king. He doesn't think anyone needs him. He thinks he's worthless because of the lies evil told him, because of the manipulation evil had in him from an early age continuing forward. The way Scar worked him, he doesn't think he's worthy of anything. He doesn't think he can go back. All right, so we have Nala kind of going back, Simba seemingly intent on staying. This is, to use another biblical analogy, this is kind of Simba's uh, Jonah moment. He is staunchly refusing to listen to the voice of God, to listen to the cries going on around him. He is stubbornly saying, no, this is the life that I want. This is the life that I think is best for me. I'm nobody, so leave me alone. That's the point he has been pushed to. That's the point evil has him thinking. He is no one. Now, this whole scene, I think, gets at the interesting idea that, the Imago Dei, the image of God, how we as humans, we are all the image bearers of God. how Christ lives and dwells within each of us. That when we go out into the world, we're carrying kind of that divine spark with us. We're carrying God with us. We're carrying Christ with us. It's we're reflections of Christ wherever we go. Like that, this scene plays off that idea really, really well. That when he's desperately hunting for Mufasa, the God figure in the story, he first sees himself. That's how he relates and sees him, that God has been in him. His father figure, that divineness has been in him. He's had to unlock it. He just had to come to that realization that his father, God in the story, never left him, but was there in him the entire time. I don't see anything. We have to look closer, deeper inside to to get at this notion. God is always with us. No matter where we go, God is with us. Christ dwells in us. Now, how much easier would life be if, whenever we had these decisions or whatever, we would actually get these like tangible voices coming through, right? Like how much easier would that make things for us? Ugh, that'd be the dream, right? Things just cut and dry. Ask God, you get James Earl Jones' voice coming from the sky. There it is. I never left you, and I never will. A notion that we cannot do things. There's nothing we can do to, to get to a point where God will leave us, where Christ will leave us. They're always inside of us. They're always with us. Like that is such a powerful notion. So ultimately, now he's journeying out of the wilderness. He is, charging back forward. And he's coming out of the wilderness very much changed. So I really want to know the timing of all of this. Like, how long did it take Nala to get out there? How long does it take them to get back? Because like with the hare, we saw it go through a lot of things. We saw it go through the digestive tract of something before ultimately coming to Rafiki. How far out are they? Is this like a 1 day run? Or is this a week? Who knows? That line there, and be one with the great I am. That's an interesting. There's a lot of weight behind that one. The Moses again, bringing it back to Moses when he asked God, who will I say sent me? When he's referring to the people. God says, tell them I am sent you. I am is the kind of personal name of God. So we're getting at that notion that Simba's doing the work of the I am, of God, saving people, getting at that parallel of Moses, walking forth under the power, sent by the I am, sent by Yahweh. Okay, question. How did these two keep up? I mean, I don't know, but just I would assume a lion's running capacity is much faster and longer than a warthog. How did they, like, what? How did these two even stay close? So here, that's his first man taking on the mantle of leadership. Follow me. Everything else up to this point has been he's been the one being directed. Now he's stepping up and taking that notion for himself. I guess that's a very key moment. So I do kind of miss the fake luau song that he does in the cartoon, but I love this even more. This is such a great kind of callback to another movie. Oh, this is so good. Playing the Be Our Guest song. Honestly, I kind of wish that had gone on a little longer. All right, the warthog is outrunning them. I need to look this up on my keyboard. What is the top speed of warthogs? That's just insane to me. Okay, this scene here, this confuses me so much. So he pulls out his staff, hidden away, my old friend. We haven't seen the staff before. He hasn't really used it. Later, all we see him do with it is just go like full ninja with it. What is going on here? Did he have some like past ninja life that he turned away from and now it has to like go back one last time? Like what is Rafiki's deal? Like I'm so confused by him. All right, so the top speed of a warthog is about 30 miles an hour, and the top speed of a lion is about 50 miles an hour. So, yeah, I don't think but they should have been able to catch up. But all right, we'll just kind of look past that. So see right here, Scar is using one of his last kind of best tactics here. Going back to that notion that he planted in Simba of you're responsible for this. You killed your father. Trying to isolate him once again. Evil is so adept at doing that. So adept at trying to push you away. That's what he's doing right here. He's trying to turn the lions against him, trying to isolate, push away his biggest threat. And he's doing that with a lie, obviously. We know Simba wasn't responsible for the death. But Simba's believed he was responsible for it for so long, he can't push back it right now. See, that evil's pushing it back in. I'm nothing. Continually working at him. What climactic scene would be complete without fire just ravaging through, right? And here, Scar commits the biggest kind of villain trope sin of all time, right? He has to have one last evil speech before he wins. He just tossed him off right here. It really would have been over. Luckily, he doesn't. He has to give his evil villain speech, kind of lay out his plan, lay out his secret right beforehand, and that is ultimately his undoing here. I see. Ultimately, evil's lies are starting to unravel. Ultimately, he's starting to get caught in his own devices. It's all coming back to bite him. Even at this point, Scar isn't willing to get his hands dirty, his paws dirty. I guess he's using the hyenas. He's using everything else, everything at his disposal to try to get out of this unscathed. Pumbaa grunting. I feel like I'm really missing the kind of punch of this scene, just without hearing the audio of it. I like this version, how we have a kind of nemesis for Nala. Because one thing on the last one, we really didn't. Her character arc was kind of over when she goes and gets Simba. And I like that here she gets a satisfying finale. She gets a nemesis of her own to fight, to combat, to overcome. See, what is what is his deal? Rafiki, what are you? just going full Tusken Raider there, just over the head. Just, what is this? Oh, slow motion attack. There you go. I like that shot where Nala and Simba are kind of fighting back to back, and they're kind of jumping in and out of each other. That's a really cool kind of synergistic shot. See, Scar, evil, trying to slink away, realizing what their plans aren't going to work, so trying to just slink away unscathed. We will to come up with another plan, to come up with another tactic. See, as always, Scar is trying to pin the blame on someone else, trying to isolate another group now. Trying to isolate the hyenas now. Always willing to throw someone else under the bus to try to save himself. Always trying to paint the picture that benefits him the most. So say we want about the kind of convenience of the fire popping up, but it does create those cool visuals you get. And there he goes, over. But not dead. But his one of his last lies is now going to come back to him. As is the case, your lies will find you out. That's You always get that notion that ultimately your lies will come back to you. And in here it's in a very obvious way. It's in a very almost ham-fisted way. But he's tried to isolate so many people that ultimately he's the one isolated. And he can't escape the kind of pit of lies he built himself. He can't get out of it, escape it. So we have the rain coming in, kind of cooling everything. You could have some more symbolism there. The rain coming in, washing away what was evil, washing the blood of Christ, washing away evil past, washing away, creating a clean slate over the land and ultimately over us and our hearts and our lives moving forward. What is your deal, Rafiki? Again, looking to the heavens, looking for guidance from his heavenly Father. In this case, Mufasa, in our case, God. And again, I'm so confused by why all these animals would show up here. Why would you do this? I wonder if like a truce is drawn. It's like, all right, if you come here, no one gets eaten. You have like a 24-hour, we won't eat you clause. And there we go. A book ending it just how it began, with a very confused lion cub and the Lion King. There we go. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this commentary for the Lion King. I'm gonna use this as kind of a base to come up with a sermon for the Lion King for our theater and theology topics. These will be on Facebook Live, as we're still not meeting in person yet. But so I'm very excited to do this. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So I look forward to talking to you all soon, and let me know what you thought of this. If this was something you want me to continue doing for future movies, let me know. If this was terribly boring, I have never done this before, so who knows? Maybe I'm real bad at it. But either way, let me know if you listened to it, what you thought of it, and I'm excited to talk with you all about The Lion King this coming Sunday when we kick off our theater and theology series. So have a great rest of your night, day, whenever you watch this, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.